Wonderful. Good evening and welcome, everyone. I just want to say one of the things about being part of the IDEA Committee, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Allyship Committee, is how ambitious and hardworking this committee is. I think it's one of the hardest working committees in Crew, and we've all become like family. And so I'm so honored that they allowed me a couple of minutes to do the introduction, but they didn't give me the list of all the people that I work with. So before I start, they've been working on this for, I want to say, at least 6 months. Could the IDEA committee members on stage and in the audience please stand? We can just give them a round of applause for all the work that they do. Okay, do I have to? This is great. I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement. And I'm just going to add in my little 2 cents. We should all know what treaty lands that we are working and living on. So if you live in the suburbs, it's your obligation as a Canadian to understand the privilege that we have of being here. As an immigrant, I think that it's an amazing opportunity. And I will start the event. We acknowledge the land is an indigenous protocol used to express gratitude to those who reside here and to honor the indigenous people who have lived and worked on this land historically and presently. We would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is currently home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. And so I welcome you. My name is Arlene Didier. I am a principal and executive vice president of Avis & Young. I lead their project management business. And I've been given the honor of thanking all of our sponsors. So thank you to all of our sponsors for their support in helping us achieve our mission and help us transform the commercial real estate industry by advancing women to positions of leadership and influence. I think I'm an example of what's happening. So much for the glass ceiling, sugar bears. Okay, upcoming events. On November 7th, we're here for the Affordable Leasing and Building Collaborate Spaces for Not-for-Profits event. November 30th, we are having the Holiday Social and Leadership Awards. I'm getting pinged. There's a waiting list apparently for the social. I don't have an inside scoop. Stop texting. December 6th, we have in the evening, 5:30 to 7:30, the book club meeting. Registration is open. Join before the next meeting. And December 13th, the last 2023 happy hour, registration opens early November. Special announcement for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Inclusion Audit Program. The Toronto Crew Board is excited to announce the launch of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion DEI Audit Program that we kicked off on October 17th. This important initiative will help us assess and enhance our commitment to DEI and support Toronto women in achieving diversity and inclusion initiatives. Our project goals are to audit for the DEI exclusionary language and assumptions and ensure our documents, processes, and communications are fully inclusive. We look forward to updating our industry outcomes of this project. Okay, and so now I'm going to introduce the moderators. I'm so peaceful. Anna Ho, a Hong Kong native and fluent Cantonese speaker. Anna Ho is a real estate advisor at Leonard Commercial Realty. I can describe her in one word: she's fierce. Anna brings over 10 years of experience in client services. She's passionate about helping clients find, lease, and create amazing office spaces that attract and retain talent. Specializing in tenant representation, Anna has worked with not-for-profits, global tech firms, and Fortune 500 companies in managing renewals, extensions, and relocations across North America. Before entering real estate, Anna completed her Master's of Social Work degree and started her career in crisis counseling at Victim Services. Anna was also an active not-for-profit consultant and public sector speaker, collaborating with senior government officials and not-for-profits. Anna co-led a national award-winning project that was instrumental in improving outcomes for youth and child welfare systems, including bringing changes to the Child and Family Services Act in Ontario. Anna is a recipient of the 2015 Attorney General's Victim Services Award of Distinction and TMU's Alumni Achievement Award. Anna was recruited to the real estate industry after working on a real estate project for a not-for-profit. Real estate notwithstanding, Anna remains passionate and a social impact and leaving this world better than we found it. That is why you will find her active as a volunteer and advocate in the community. Jasky Handel brings years of professional experience across many industries to Colliers. Jassy specializes in office leasing and tenant representation. Prior to joining Colliers, Jassy's diverse experience spans from education to the not-for-profit sector. Her past roles include Director of Resource Development for the United Way, Halton and Hamilton, and leader of Women United Way, Halton and Hamilton. Known for her positive attitude and tenacity, Jassy has a dependable work ethic and brings a professional, tailored solution for every client. Jassy understands the value to build impactful experiences that uncover and meet her clients' unique needs. With a strong family background in real estate and development, Jassy shows up for the clients with passion, insight, and determination. Jassy believes in the power and strength of community. As an active community member and strong advocate for diversity and women's rights, Jassy serves on the board of directors for Hippie Halton. Thank you very much. I'll give it to you.
Testing. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Arlene, for that introduction, and thank you to all of the organizers, volunteers, and of course our guests for being here today to discuss a very important topic. We've all heard stories about how companies are managing real estate decisions and challenges in a post-pandemic world. Mainstream media platforms often feature government and private companies, but we haven't heard much from our nonprofits. Last year, Toronto Crew hosted an inclusive development event focused on housing and land development. This year, with higher inflation, rising interest rates, combined with an increase in demand for community services, we wanted to use this stage to give a voice to the challenges nonprofits face in securing space.
When we often think of not-for-profits, we think of organizations providing housing, counseling, or other community supports. Not-for-profits operate exclusively for the social welfare, civic improvement, and act as key stakeholders for the broader ecosystem. So this also includes policy advocacy, research, and funders. Now, with Anna and I both having experience in the social service sector, we both know firsthand the impact. And the not-for-profit sector's contribution is priceless when it comes to providing vital programs for our most vulnerable community members. And that's why we are so thrilled and excited to unpack this important conversation around affordable real estate for this sector.
Awesome. So it's our pleasure now to introduce our esteemed panel, starting with Leslie Wu, a tri-sector leader with over 25 years of experience building sustainable communities and shaping urban development in Canada's fastest growing urban region. Leslie has been CEO at Civic Action since 2020. For over 2 decades, Civic Action has been mobilizing established and rising leaders to both steward a future for the city and to actively respond to current urban crises. Before joining Civic Action, Leslie served as Metrolink's Chief Planning and Development Officer. An experienced planner, architect, and community activator, she is a 2023 Top 25 Canadian Immigrant Awardee and one of Canada's Top 100 Most Powerful Women in 2017. It keeps going though. A 2019 Toronto Power Woman by Biz Now, Spacing Toronto's Transit Changemaker in 2016, and Canada Women's Infrastructure Network's inaugural 2015 Outstanding Leader. Leslie uses her voice and platform, She Builds Cities, to amplify and celebrate other women city builders. Welcome, Leslie. Thank you. Our next panelist is Liza Stiff from TAS Impact. For those of you who don't know, TAS Impact is a landlord, owner, and developer. TAS Impact is a certified B Corporation, signatory to PRI, Principles for Responsible Investing, and a member of the Global Impact Investing Network. TAS pursues opportunities that create value for investors and generate measurable social and environmental impact. TAS has an active development pipeline and portfolio under management totaling over 7 million square feet of residential and commercial space. Liza Stiff is the Vice President of Innovation and Design at TAS Impact. She oversees connecting TAS's impact goals with project pipeline from early engagement and project visioning through to construction and occupancy. Liza is a design thinker and natural collaborator. She brings over 20 years of experience in design, architecture, real estate, and project delivery. Her previous experience includes complicated public-private partnership models in the GTA and abroad. Liza's experience combined with her passion for driving meaningful change helps her guide the team to innovate and strategically drive impact while pushing the traditional constraints of real estate development. Welcome, Liza.
Well, it is my great pleasure to introduce Alex Dow. Alex is the Director of Community Initiatives and Partnerships for United Way Greater Toronto. Alex joined United Way Greater Toronto in 2016 and oversees the organization's investments and strategic work in the areas of employment and strong neighborhoods. During the pandemic, Alex also led United Way's partnership with local governments and community agencies around local COVID-19 response, ensuring that low-income and vulnerable community members could get the health and other social supports that they needed. United Way's experience with community and social purpose real estate includes supporting communities to develop vision for affordable housing and community services for neighborhoods, and also investing in a network of 8 community hubs and supporting strategic initiatives like Social Medicine Initiative with the University Health Network and the City of Toronto. Alex also co-backbones the Social Purpose Real Estate Reference Group with the University of Toronto's Infrastructure Institute. United Way is looking to deepen their commitment to social purpose real estate, building on these foundational activities. Welcome, Alex. Last but not least, it is my pleasure to introduce Justin Bob. A first-generation Canadian, Justin has been involved in the not-for-profit sector for over a decade. Justin is a Chief Operating Officer at Indus Community Services, a community benefit organization focused on building resilient and healthy communities by offering person-centered, anti-oppressive programs and services. Justin has an extensive background in community and sports development. This also includes the social housing sector and the use of sports as a tool of engagement to support youth facing barriers. Justin is a graduate from Toronto Metropolitan University with a BA in Sociology. Welcome, Justin.
Well, we have a very fierce panel in front of us today. Clearly, very excited for this discussion. And so now moving into the panel portion of today, for our very first question, this one is going to be for Indus. We've all seen the rise of inflation and the cost of living, so it's also no surprise that commercial rents are also on the rise. Despite high vacancy rates and being the strongest tenants market that we've seen in over 15 years, nonprofits are still struggling to find affordable and suitable space. Justin, we know your group has been looking for space in the Brampton area. So can you please tell us a little bit about Indus's experience in procuring real estate and how has it changed, if at all, pre versus post-pandemic?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and just an honor to be up here with all of y'all. Appreciate it. Thanks for the land acknowledgement and the call to action for all of us. And what a dope collection of people. Like, for having us a diversity in the room is so cool. Yeah. Women know how to throw good events. Like, I think that's what you get from this. And then what do? You make the guy go first. So good. Yeah, so, you know, it's been challenging. There's a lot of factors. We need to be close to our clients. We need to understand the cultural context of their needs. We need to be close to them to build trust and build affinity with the life experiences that they're facing. And the reality is that the people that we serve can't afford to live in the areas where we can find space. The other side of the reality is post-pandemic, as was mentioned in your intro, the need for social services is only increasing. The gap is getting further, right? So we recognize that the need is increasing, and funding partners are also strapped for cash. You're finding a lot of conflict in funding where the needs of Canadians are so diverse and interconnected that funding one socially complex issue is maybe just creating a systemic inequity in another area as well. So we're finding a huge challenge in being present in the communities where our clients currently are, knowing that the real estate market is also shifting where they're going to be. When we talk about, you know, social co-location and providing services for people with the shifts post-pandemic, and if people even want to come in and see you. So we support, you know, vulnerable women and gender diverse people who are in abusive relationships, maybe victims of domestic violence. For some of them, leaving the house to come see us is not an option. It's easier for them to jump on a phone call or a Zoom call and speak to one of our counselors directly. So do I procure real estate that provides a private counseling room if no one's going to actually use it, but then that one day that person needs to come in and I don't have a space for them, I can't meet their needs. So as the needs of our clients is shifting, we're trying to stay up on it. And, you know, a big challenge is with funding. So I want to give a shout out to United Way, because not all funders even understand the complexity of the work that social service agencies do. And funders like United Way create a lot of core operational funds. Like, it's not sexy. No one wants to pay to keep the lights on. They do that. So we're often struggling. Sometimes a funder will give us money to deal with the direct interaction, but they don't even give us a rent line. So when we go back and say, this is so cool, where should we do this? They're like, well, you figure it out. So it's really challenging. And then I think about the built infrastructure of real estate, and we need pliable, flexible space that's dynamic, that responds to the needs of the clients we're working with. And a lot of time the built infrastructure doesn't suit our needs. And we don't have the budget lines to come in and do a CapEx project. We have to be really creative in the ways that we approach that. So, you know, working with partners like yourself in the room, it's trying to greater articulate the diverse needs of the clients that we serve and work as partners with you all to find solutions for those challenges.
Wow, very well said. Yeah, and I think it's definitely a trend that we're seeing amongst nonprofits providing frontline services, where now there's this whole kind of hybrid, remote, you know, technology element to providing counseling services. But that one time, right, or a few times that you might need that space for a client, it's not available. So how do we address some of those kind of ad hoc, right, need for space? And I just want to open up the floor to the rest of the panel on that question as well, or anything to add on to what Justin has said. It's a lot to unpack.
Go. You go.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I'd also be curious to know around funding timelines, because I know that can also be a challenge when it comes to not-for-profits. You may find a space, but then you may not meet that timeline. So any insights around that area as well would be interesting.
So I'll jump in. Oop, testing, it works. So we try as much as possible to do multi-year funding. And, some government programs do that and some funders do that, but a lot also do one-year projects or two-year projects and then don't really care about how you keep the lights on or how you pay for the space. You're just supposed to figure it out, as you said so eloquently. So that's a really important part of the strategy behind our funding approach. And then I think we also are flexible, as Justin said, flexible for agencies to call and say, even during the pandemic, hey, we thought we needed it for this and we actually need it for that, or so rent is costing more right now, or wages are costing more right now, and can we be flexible and we'll fill the holes with other parts of our funders, other funders' pots of money. I think on capital, since we're here to talk about real estate too, we're having a conversation right now with one of our hubs that may have to move. They're going to be displaced after 12-ish years at their site, and it's a mix of a community health center and social services. And so if we want them to move, there is a fly that somehow got in here. If we want to support them in their move, and it's a partnership between United Way and the ministry, their new space needs to be at least 10 to 15 years before the ministry would have a conversation about supporting capital for that move. So there's lots of, when you're an agency trying to put together all of these different funding buckets that each have different parameters for how they're going to support you around real estate or other things, then you're trying to triangulate all of that and find that really narrow window to make a real estate project happen. Yeah.
No, thank you. Leslie, I think you wanted to add something on it as well?
I was going to, but I can.
Putting you on the spot.
No, well, I think so. The perspective I come from is, Civic Action is as a not-for-profit, we're not a service provider. We consider ourselves a bit of glue, which is creating the network to connect folks to each other. And what my comment was going to be, in addition to this need for more flexibility, is this overwhelming need for partnerships of all sorts. And we see that, and that's the work we do. We match people. We say, have you talked to so-and-so in all the sectors and in all the industries? So even if you're in one specific social service sector, and your bubble of who you know and what you know is in there, sometimes there are different industries, different levels of government that actually could be good partners, whether it's co-location or all different kinds of expertise that support someone finding brokerage firm support to know what's out there, financing. There are just so many dimensions to the situation in terms of trying to find a solution that I think as we think about the not-for-profit sector and how it moves forward, it needs to have this kind of multi-scenario approach to how to solve. Because in the past, and even before the pandemic, it was fairly clear how you would go about doing these things, and you could predict your degree of success well ahead of time. That's completely changed. There's so much unknown and there's so much variability and that to me, for the not-for-profit folks in connection with understanding real estate, is a really important aspect that the not-for-profit sector is generally not equipped to know how to navigate.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll say one other thing. Oh, yeah. I'll say one other thing. They told me speak up because it's being recorded. And that is that I think we're still figuring out as a sector what our space needs are, right? There's robust evaluation that's now happening or now wrapping up coming out of the pandemic to say, hey, did going online benefit your client outcomes or not, right? And in what way and for whom within that group, right? So I think it's, we don't have all the answers. I was on a call the other day or the other week, and they were saying, yeah, of course, the seniors healthy living program, you're getting more people, now that we've spent a couple years of enabling seniors to get on tech, but the outcomes aren't better. because you actually want those folks to leave their homes, to engage in the gentle exercise classes, and when they're doing it at home and they're kind of following on the screen, they're not really getting the full benefit of the program. So there are also going to be trade-offs, right? When we think about like, okay, what do we keep online? What do we move back in person? Do we do both approaches to try to catch as many folks in the service as possible? And so I think agencies are really still kind of evaluating day by day, like what is best to bring in-house and have the space, and what should stay online. Yeah.
Can I add one more thing, which is, as you were talking, there are also some, to your point, fundamental barriers that disable the not-for-profit sector generally. And I'll give one example. So we have a very good colleague, Pam Hart, who runs the Native Women's Resource Center in Toronto. And we were having this conversation. The Native Women's Resource Center needs to expand. They need more facilities. They have a growing demand. And just in conversation with Pam, she says, where's the truth and reconciliation? I'm sick and tired of begging for land and property. The system needs to dramatically change its metrics about what success should look like for different parts of our society, because we're existing in a colonial system, and we're all part of it, for whom it's not fit for purpose for where we need to get to. And she made me think, yeah, she's right, but who's talking about that? Who's actually saying to you guys work for big landowners and stuff, part of our reconciliation is an economic reconciliation, right? Yes. And part of it is deconstructing what we own and giving back to those that are owed it. That's a big question, and I think the not-for-profit sector, because the not-for-profit sector operates, we're like little hamsters on a wheel, and we're just trying to make ends meet. These bigger questions that stand in the way of real progress are the questions for the industry, are the questions for government, and we need to have the civic-minded leadership to help, while we're doing all this frontline work, carrying us all forward. And so I just put that on the table because there's the tactical fixes, and then there's the systemic fixes that are the harder ones, the difficult ones, and really the things that get in our way to make real progress. Sorry,
Leslie,
you made me think of that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing
Great.
Thank you. That's such an important, outlook to look at, and you're right. This is something that we do need to address. And when we think about not-for-profits, there's just so many additional layers when it comes to that space and ensuring that we're looking at the full system as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. I just want to switch gears from challenges to potential solutions. United Way is the second largest funder of social service programs in Canada. And aside from funding and supporting these vital programs, United Way is also investing in social purpose real estate. And United Way Greater Toronto has directly contributed to research and initiatives, and one, exploring various shared space models, and second, in cooperative ownership models that really help reduce that overhead and operational costs. Alex, will you please share examples, or even perhaps how, for the not-for-profits in the group today, how can they apply these models?
Yeah. So I'll talk about a couple of different models, and then I'll talk a little bit about where we're going. So I think our network of agencies that we support really see themselves as neighbors in their community, as community leaders as well, and as neighborhood builders. And so we have a couple of agencies that are doing some really innovative work around what we would call, or what I think in the planning speak is called, like meanwhile spaces now, but it was just like transforming underutilized assets. Like that's kind of how I know it. So we've got folks that are doing projects in parking lots, like at Jane Finch, or one of our agencies, Jane Finch Center. We supported them to do some work to transform the corner of the parking lot into like a dynamic community gathering space. And so they would have performances, they would have like educational events, like all kinds of things. And it was about kind of like reclaiming the power of the narrative about the community as well, and the power of people gathering together. We have other projects that are doing work in, ice rinks in city facilities when the ice comes out in the summer and turning that into like skateboard parks or hydro corridors, which, at the end of the day was a lot of bureaucracy, but working with the city and then working with hydro and then people don't talk, right? So many years to do, we have organizations in Northeast Scarborough, Food Share Toronto, which people probably know a lot about because they really speak up a lot in the food space and food security space. So yeah, we support that kind of use of space, which I think is like a really kind of innovative way that the community, that the nonprofit sector can, sometimes because we're really working on those shoestring budgets, we look at things with like, oh, that's an asset, right? That's an underutilized asset that we could do something with that would be super cheap and we can do on a one-year project grant and do a demonstration project and then, build proof of concept and then try to, and also build relationships so that folks are like, hey, it's okay to have young people skateboard in here and like, they're not going to burn the building down and we're not going to have a security fiasco and, we can actually like use these spaces. And a lot of the projects I'm going to talk about are actually projects in the inner suburbs too, where a lot of my career has been. So spaces that are not necessarily like as pedestrian friendly or as welcoming to people to gather. So there's some interesting work that we support, lots of interesting work that we support, and our sector does like that. Then I think what we're really known for is our community hubs, right? So those 8 community hubs that exist now, we have 2 more under construction. And so they're different models. I'd say we have a couple that are unfortunately like private leases that, as I said, are coming to the end of their life cycle and where, of course it's Toronto. We wanted major intersections where major bus routes brought people. The whole idea was like a one-stop shop where people could get all the services that their family might need. And of course, people are like, oh, I'm at the corner of, I don't know, Kennedy and Lawrence or Jane and Eglinton, and I'm going to, of course, throw buildings up there now. And we see transit expanding, and so transit's also triggering a lot of development. And so those community hubs, there's a mix of models. So some are led by one agency, others have an independent incorporated board. Some are in public spaces, so one of them is in a partnership with the City of Toronto, which I'm going to shout out public partnerships too, not just not-for-profit ownership, but if you can work with the city and the city pays for the cleaning and the city pays for the reception and the city pays for the lights to be on, like that can really help nonprofits to put their dollars towards like the things that they can do best and the true mission alignment. So there's a bunch of, that's a model that we definitely scaled and where there's lots of lessons. I also will speak about maybe one other thing, I think, so that I'm not speaking too much, which is some of the kind of community ownership pieces, and this is also where we're going. So things like neighborhood land trusts is a model that we've put some seed funding into, and we're seeing lots of interest and uptake from our network of agencies across the region. We're just funding a new land trust in York Region, for example, with Blue Door. And the essence of that model is similar, even if the entity is called something different. So community land trusts, community development corporations, you might be familiar with different ways of talking about it, but it's essentially an organization that is, where the mission is more around the delivery of the real estate, of community real estate, right? Sometimes these things can also deliver community economic development initiatives, but the real estate is one of the major objectives that they sometimes engage in. And so central to that is about building community wealth. Central to that is about preventing the displacement of services, holding on to an asset that could grow over time as your community grows or as prices grow in your neighborhood, to really maintain the continuity, the history of the neighborhood, the service delivery that people have come to rely on and will continue to rely on. So we're really interested in models like that, and not-for-profit ownership, whether that's through traditional means or through setting up like a distinct entity that whose mission it is to kind of create that real estate and maintain and manage that real estate product.
Yeah. I'll stop there because I don't want to take all the time.
Does anyone else have anything to add in terms of, different shared space or real estate models before we kind of shift gears? Okay, I guess we're shifting gears. No, thank you so much for that. I think when you were speaking, it made me think of just creative ways to utilize real estate. And one of the things that is actually just 3 blocks from my house, I'm in the neighborhood of Woodbine and Danforth, and across the city there's only, I want to say, don't quote me on this, but like 7 or 8 community fridges across the entire city of Toronto. But essentially it's just these, convenience stores or even a community center that said, hey, we have a refrigerator here that we've set up. You're more than welcome to drop off food that you're not going to use, or pick up food that you might need. And so it's open for everybody. There's no sign-up list. There's nothing. You don't have to write your name down anywhere. It's simply you walk up and it's a pick up and a drop off type of situation. And it's not going to make any landlord or owner like $1 million, obviously, but it's definitely one way to utilize real estate that's not traditional, and it's a big part of solving some of these social problems that we've seen become more and more of a pertinent issue, especially post-pandemic. And so, I have a garden at home, and so I had a boatload of lettuce. Like, the amount of lettuce that grew back in my garden is a little bit ridiculous. And I was like, I cannot finish all this lettuce. So I dropped off a ton of lettuce at this community fridge, and then I went back the next day with my dog walking by, and it was all gone. So, it's a part of solving like a food insecurity issue actually in our city, that it's just really ad hoc and all done by volunteers. This was just a convenience store saying, hey, we're willing to put a fridge up front. You guys do what you want. So I think that's something that, landlords and owners of properties could really think about. Like, you're not going to make $1 million, but it's a part of helping to make our communities stronger and healthier and better for everybody. So,
and you'd be amazed at what community can do with like a very simple community design process. A power connection, so some lighting so that the area is safe, and also mow the lawn. That's it. And we can transform it into something amazing. I think of all the undeveloped sites. I grew up in Malvern, right? And there are parts of Malvern that look very similar to when I grew up, that are still empty fields, right? And they're slowly changing, but there's still a lot of empty land that people just throw a chain link fence, not even a chain link fence. Sometimes you get the cheap, orange, tapey fence, and you're just like, why? With the metal stake, right? That falls down almost immediately after you put it up, and it's like, why can't we figure out a better way to connect people with the real estate, with the people that have the ideas and want to use it, and probably can do it on a proven model where there's low liability and low risk for the property owner, but they could at least be a better neighbor.
I know
right?
Liza has a lot to say.
I know,
on this.
and I know we were going to switch gears a little bit, but before we go there, it's probably worth just. And I'm one of these things is not like the other. I'm the developer here. The quiet developer waiting in the corner. But maybe before we go to the next question,
Yeah,
I think it's really important the value that we, for even a meanwhile use, at TAS we have committed to 10% of our non-residential space to be below market. We also have 10% of our residential space to be affordable. But what that means is both the meanwhile as well as our sort of future legacy spaces in our ground up developments and in our community hubs. But the value to the meanwhile uses coming together, we use our engagement really we don't ever go into any community and assume we have all the answers. We know we have to engage, we have to understand who's already there, what not-for-profits are there. They're the community. We're not going to come in and bring and gentrify and bring, and even assume that we know how to change or make things, add to that. So one particular project is the project in which our organizations are involved in Cooksville. And it is a parking lot. It's a future redevelopment site, and we have been seeking out the community there for over 3 years. We've been building capacity within that community, and every single event that happens on that site is a way for us to really research, to understand what we can put into the future development to ensure its success. So one of the things this particular community needed is a community fridge, is a pantry. So we have those on the site. The community, we've found many groups that wish to have community space, so we're designing actively into the future space a place for a community market. We tested that by hosting a community market with the community this past year, and all of that are ways for us as the big bad developer to really understand foot traffic, footpath, design, space, size, test these things, and to really understand what we can do into our future space.
I love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Okay, there we go. No, I knew that Liza had a lot to say on this topic because when we talked
I had more, but I was just...
Yeah, well, don't worry, girl, we're getting to you next. This question is for you. You're next. But yeah, I know when I talked to Liza, when I invited her to join the panel, she sits on various boards as well, and one of which is actually, interestingly enough, to utilize development land and buildings that are not currently being occupied and leasing that out or giving that space out, I guess, practically for free, correct me if I'm wrong, to artists and nonprofits that need temporary space. So she's very intertwined into this sort of like creative use of real estate and space, and very embedded in the community. So, moving on kind of to the next question and pivoting the conversation a little bit, we're really right in line with what Liza just said. Landlords are viewed as the big bad wolf oftentimes, but don't worry, no rocks will be thrown on you tonight. But we have seen examples of some landlords be very intentional about how their development and properties contribute to the needs of a community. So, Liza, what are the potential concerns for landlords regarding having frontline social services that have, say, clients that are connected to addictions, mental illness, victims fleeing violence, accessing your buildings from a security standpoint, right? And a secondary question is, has TAS turned away any tenants as a result of these concerns?
I know, where's the shining light? No, the short answer is no, we haven't turned away. And in fact, I'd love to use some examples. We have one particular project in the East End where we are, it's a redevelopment site with the Salvation Army. We are designing back in that day facility into the base of the future development, and that's just how it is. And the concerns over shared space, all of that is just things that need to be solved. And I know that's not really explaining the how, but really by engaging in understanding all parties' views, and really that's how we can make everyone comfortable. Another example is we have affordable units in a purpose-built rental project where we do have 2 organizations of women fleeing domestic abuse. And the idea is to not bring attention, but rather to really understand the users, and through design and through education and capacity building, we can overcome anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. Well said. I didn't actually know that TAS had 2 buildings dedicated to women fleeing violence, so that's...
We have units within a multi-purpose rental project. that are
That's
dedicated.
amazing. Kind of like the YWCA and having a dedicated building, but you're dedicated units.
It's mixed, so it's
Yeah.
not, it's within it looks and feels like an all-purpose rental
Yeah.
building. And you wouldn't know that we had 10 units that are dedicated to some shelters in that neighborhood for women fleeing domestic abuse. But the best thing is that through our engagement and through understanding the community that the building is in, we know that the women and children really start school while they're in the shelter. And so because of the proximity to our rental project, we can ensure that those children and women can stay in the neighborhood.
Wow. Wow.
Eliza, if you don't mind me asking, how would an organization, a not-for-profit organization, get in touch with you? I mean, I know my team and I have been working with one particular group, and we've had landlords turn us away just because of the use. So how would someone get in touch with TAS?
Well, we have a website.
Just reach out to me and I'll put you in touch.
I mean, it's a great question. So from what we do in our projects is we underwrite for below market commercial space, and in doing that, we're usually able to really, through our engagement, seek out groups who are looking for space. It's rare where we have a space where we might be looking sort of the reverse. Typically, we have a roster and we understand through our engagement of who is that community. But we certainly are always open for new relationships and connecting.
It's amazing, and it's so encouraging to hear that, and just knowing that there is a resource out there for not-for-profit. So thank you so much for sharing.
Can I add something? Because I think what TAS is doing, and really a handful of developers are doing, is where the future is, in my mind. And so if we believe that, then we're in transition and they're ahead of the curve. The challenge is getting more of the industry to have a different balance sheet than it has traditionally had. And so the work that I've seen TAS do on their impact strategic plan, they make it part of their business. So it's not a one-off. It shouldn't be a one-off. It shouldn't be that unique. It should be how we all operate. And I think in whatever space any of us sit, we should be doing our best to move that tank forward, because meanwhile the world is swirling around us and the solutions are in front of us, but we can't get our shit together. And so I'm just so amazed at the work TAS does, and we need to do everything we can to support the TASs. There's a number of other developers in this kind of orb, and I just feel they need a lot more support. So kudos to you.
And just on that note, I just want to move into civic action for a minute. And so civic action is known to bring key players across the public, private, and not-for-profit sector, and really helping shape that future, just as Leslie was talking about around real estate and supporting communities. And so, not-for-profits often, they don't even know where to begin, especially like they're wearing multiple hats, and real estate really typically isn't in their wheelhouse. And I know for our not-for-profit members today, I'm sure they're curious to hear of how do these begin, or where do they start, and how can civic action help?
So I think, first of all, this big orb of not-for-profit, it's very diverse to begin with. And actually, even before I start, thank you to IDEA, because it's great that you're taking these topics and dissecting them and engaging in them. But the not-for-profit sector is service providers, frontline, it's advocacy groups, it's philanthropy, it's think tanks, and they all have different needs, so there's that range of variability. Then, in the sense, not-for-profits are both on the supply and demand end. So demand meaning we need space, supply meaning we have assets that could probably create more real estate value for themselves and others. And so when you think about it in the context of what it is you need, I think it's really important, we were talking about it earlier, to understand where it is you think your future is going to be, which is one of the most difficult things to do right now. So I'm a planner by training. It's scenario planning times 1,000, and risk mitigation all the way. So we can go this way, this way, this way. If we go here, here's the challenges, the pros and the cons in terms of what kind of space, a completely zero space. Like we don't need any space, in fact, and we can do everything remotely in other people's space. Or we need a hybrid, or we just want, because of what we do, and it varies on what it is you do. So I think that starting what you can do yourself to understand where you think you're going to be and what are the risks related to that, because you're going to make a choice and then you're going to make different choices as you go. And so flexibility is one of the most important things to understand. The other thing that layers on to all of this is the dynamic of the workforce itself. Like the expectations of what work means for the not-for-profit. It's happening in all sectors, in the public sector, in the private sector. The not-for-profit sector, I generally feel is more vulnerable in terms of the nature of the workforce. And so trying to create a sense of culture and community within a not-for-profit place has a lot to do with it. And so trying to understand that is really important. Before you go out to even say what I want, you need to have that assessment. And then on the supply side, I think not-for-profits need to really assess their assets, their physical assets and then their other assets, and try to determine, and you can't do this alone, what is the value, or how can we up that value of what we own. We talked about the Social Purpose Real Estate Accelerator. I sit on the Advisory Council of United Ways Apart. That's a great example of, and we need to get it times 100, but where not-for-profits are they do a little, I don't know what to call it, a course, an induction into how to do a pro forma, right? And the Infrastructure Institute brings in experts, planners, real estate brokers and so forth, and helps them know how to do a pitch, like all that kind of stuff. And so that's one piece of the puzzle. But once you've done that, then you've got land and you want to build more, let's use the Christie Welcome Refugee Center, right? And they want to put more rooms in there. They can have the pro forma, then they can do the pitch. Then they have to find the equity, like equity partners. Then they have to get the financing. And then the worst part of it, even if you get all of that, they need a guarantor, right? Which is even harder. So partnerships becomes really important because there are people and organizations willing to support. But if you don't know where they are, and you don't know where to, which is your question, how do you begin? So part of the work, and a lot of the work we do at Civic Action, is this constant connecting. Because in many respects, creativity and innovation, you don't necessarily know exactly where it's going to happen. We just hosted a summit a couple weeks ago focusing on affordability, prosperity, and trust, bringing public, private, not-for-profit, rising leaders, established leaders in rooms to discuss these pieces. And in the end, a portion of what we designed for those collisions we kind of wanted to nurture. There's probably hundreds of other things that came out of that I will never know about to a certain degree. So for not-for-profits, one of the first steps is know yourself, understand what you have, but then probably explore unlikely industries, organizations, or partners, because your brain will start to connect dots about your needs. I think we often try to solution within our own bubble. Yes. And what we've learned so far is the status quo is not working for any of us, and we love each other dearly in our own little circles, but it is that expanded network and the possibility of new partnerships that creates and generates greater ideas to solutions. So I encourage the not-for-profit sector to reach out wherever you can, and we're happy to help if you need some help. Leaders in the private sector, leaders in the public sector, nurturing relationships that seem distant in the beginning, but you never, like my mother always said, you never know You don't know what's going to happen. You can't predict it, but relationships and partnerships give you a better chance at finding a solution about a way to go forward. So those are the things, to distill it down for any organization, constantly trying to search for like-minded individuals and unlike-minded individuals in order to explain to people what you're doing, what your mission is, learning about being curious about what others do, because they themselves may not know that they're a good partner for you.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of talking and a lot of meeting and a lot of open-ended things that may go nowhere today but could result in something later.
Absolutely.
Can I proceed on that a little bit? I think because that becomes so important when we think about the scale of the challenge that faces our communities now. And I think nobody should be building a single-use, single-story facility anymore in this region. Right? So if you're a community agency and you have the benefit of having an asset or being able to procure an asset, you could work alone and you could put a single-story facility or maybe a two-story facility. But if we're going to have a dent in the housing crisis and all these other pieces, you're going to need to partner. You're going to need to talk to some of those partners. You're going to have to figure out that capital stack. You're going to have to work with across a bunch of different partners and put a bunch of different services in the base so that you're meeting the needs of the hopefully 20, 30%, 35% affordable in the building, and the rest of the mix that you need to finance the project. So I just think it's so important that we get out of, as you say, get out of just the old bubble of our sector and the old examples of cool things we could do, because that was great, but now we need to do more complex things, and doing more complex things requires more partners and more diverse partners.
Yeah, I always say lots of people are doing lots of great things, but it's like confetti and random acts of kindness. And that was fine for a while. It was fine for a while. It was okay, but everything is so interdependent now, we can't afford to do that anymore.
Yes.
To your point, whether it's a mixed-use community or being engaged in your own community, neighborhood district about what's happening from a planning standpoint, because in there's opportunity too. May not be if you don't own an asset, right? And but there's a need that your community, you're serving a specific need in the community. You can find the community should help you find the space, right? Not just you alone advocating for it.
And I want to give a real life example, actually, of exactly what you're both talking about. There's an organization that I've been involved with in different capacities for over 10 years now, and they came to me and said, hey, we want to build a mixed-use property on the land that we currently own, but we don't have the funds to do it. And we wouldn't necessarily want to use the entire building just for our organization and our service users. Do you know who we could talk to, potentially partner on this project, right? And I was like, okay, here's somebody at City of Toronto who you could talk to about helping to support a project like this, because I'm sure they have grants and funding, right? Because you're doing something for the community. Okay, well, here's somebody else I know that's actually very close to where your office is right now that is interested in doing something similar. So it's about connecting, like what both of you said, with like-minded and also unlike-minded individuals. You never think connecting with a real estate broker that you would somehow be able to put together a project, but when you connect with the right people, and I think in my situation and Jack's situation, we've got both 10 years experience in the nonprofit sector, we're able to look at things from a real estate perspective that is also just very aligned, I think, with the nonprofit sector, knowing this industry so well and so intimately. And so, yeah, it's about branching out of your, inner circle and who you know and collaborate with now, and look at, other options like a TAS, like a Civic Action or a United Way. I mean, United Way is very well known, no offense, but so everybody sort of tends to reach out to United Ways of the world, right? But, or like an Indus, right? And you're based in GTA West, right? So for any organizations that are looking for space in that area, like maybe talk to somebody who's also looking for space right now and see if there's opportunity to collaborate together, right? So yeah, certainly just to add to that is a very real life example of organizations needing to branch out and get connected to the right people.
Can I add a gender lens to this conversation? Because as you were talking, it reminded me. So there's a professor at the University of Toronto, Rotman School of Business called Tiziana Casarino, and they run the program for women leaders. And she gives a lecture about networks, and this is particularly directed at women, because the concept of a network is this notion that we have this tight series of relationships that we all look out for each other, and it's, you know, coffee every whatever, and we're doing all that stuff. And she said those are really important. They support you on a day-to-day basis, but there's this sort of the loose network, which is someone you meet in, like tonight, and you kind of, you know, you have your little exchange, and but you don't call, you know, you're not calling them up every week, but you go to another event, and someone says, oh, what are you up to? Well, I'm doing this, and I'm interested in X, Y, and Z. And they go, you know, it's interesting. I met this other woman at this other event. Here's her number. You can get to her. So that loose network is the thing, if you're, you know, it's the thing that connects you to opportunity, jobs, projects, less so than the dense network. And for women, there is this is the data, she says, women feel that every connection needs to be uber successful. And like we need to nurture it to death, otherwise it's not successful. And it helped me a lot, because it's like, it's okay if you just met them once, right? But remember who they are, and the time will come, they will remember you, be curious, and the world will unfold as the world will unfold. So it's a very difficult thing to grasp because it's out of your control, right?
Everything can't be perfect?
I know, exactly. Exactly. So I just know that as we talk about how to build partnerships and where to reach out to, keep that in mind. And don't overpressure yourself into the establishment. I gotta make this partnership happen. It has to work. Treat it in the nature that it is. We're curious about each other and we're learning about each other. And if I never see you again for 3 months, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I like that.
If I can build on that, at the risk of mansplaining after a really it's hard, because what you're saying makes perfect sense to me. And when you look at the nonprofit space, it's a lot of dope, powerful women running organizations. But the unpaid labor of society is still on their shoulders too.
Yeah.
So like, we've been afforded the privilege to network and go to golf and go to get beers, and like, it's just so normal for us. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me. And then I'm looking at a room full of people who are going outside of their day job to build connection and to do exactly what you're speaking of. And it's like the burden just falls right back on you again.
Yeah,
So it's such an interesting point you make. And we got to find a way to take this and build some action out of it, because you're 100% spot on. But I think about so many women who would love that chance to go do that. But like, my wife's at home right now because I'm here,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And I recognize that. So on the nonprofit side, where a lot of the expertise that, you know, you two hold and what Liza does for organizations like ours specifically is help build that capacity.
Yeah.
Because we can't hire the expert in real estate, and we can't hire the expert in networking, and the power that you all bring is actually really important for us as nonprofits too, to talk us through a pro forma, because most of us would have never heard of that before. So that's really powerful what you shared. I appreciate that.
100%. And that brings us to, you know, our final question and the example that I had talked about. We often hear discussion, at least amongst my clients, my nonprofit clients, around to buy or not to buy real estate. So this question is for the entire panel. What are the pros and cons of leasing versus, say, buying a property as a nonprofit? And what are the optics around that as well?
Well, it depends.
Yeah, you start us off.
Well, I don't think the decision, so let me just say it this way. What the considerations the private sector or the public sector take in making a decision to buy or sell are not dissimilar in the not-for-profit sector. The thing that I think factors in is the proportionate weighting of some of the criteria for deciding, depending on the organization. I'm a tiny organization with just under 20 people. This guy here, giant organization, but it's got all this other frontline stuff. So the risk and more assets, we have very few physical assets. And so the decision for us will be very different than for them about, I would never imagine buying, at least unless it was some project that we were doing. So it's a funny question because there's some universal things about that decision, regardless of who you are, regardless of what industry or sector, they remain sort of consistent. And then it's really like, how much risk can your organization bear? Like, how much are you willing, like if you have degrees of certainty about where you are in the next couple of years, you'll make a very different decision than if you're moving from hand to mouth on a month-to-month basis, obviously, right? But you need the space, and you're gonna take it for free if you can. Right? So, I don't know. It's not a very satisfying answer, but.
No, it's complex. Every organization is different. So I'd say a couple of things like, I think for some of our organizations, if you are going to do, we've observed that if you are going to occupy or consolidate, then that is a different calculus, right? Like, okay, we are gonna move, these 5 disparate spaces that right now operationally do not work for us. Our staff teams don't even really talk to each other, and we need them to be integrated because that's gonna mean better service delivery. We want all our partners coming to the same building, and it's gonna be better for our clients. You've got a social case and probably a business case for, okay, we're going to pursue a real estate thing, and maybe it's not even just about you, but it's again about the others that you might co-locate with. That's different than I think folks that might be operating like with a very wide geography where they do need to maintain like a footprint in a couple different places. Maybe that footprint could be smaller. Maybe they're more looking at like leasing or being like a tenant in somebody else's kind of community-owned or community hub, sorry. I think we've seen some of our funded agencies struggle with some of the property management stuff. Like for our bigger agencies, if you're a community health center, if you've got a really stable immigration and refugee, like federal funding, healthy budget with a multi-year contract, and you can pay facilities and you can pay for the reception, then it probably makes sense for you. If you're already struggling to like, you've got an ED and you've got program staff and you've got nothing in between, you've got no middle management layer, probably doesn't make a lot of sense for you. You probably can't afford to own and maintain a building. And I think the other thing now is, because we're exploring this, I'm gesticulating towards my team that are here. But we're exploring creating like a real estate a fund or a set of real estate finance tools, one of which could be acquisition. But one of the things that we are looking at is like, how often is that really going to be possible in this market? Or is it going to be much more likely that government might say, hey, we've got this surplus piece of land, and yes, we could take a hit. We're not going to sell at market, or we're going to partner together to do something. That's probably more of a practical reality for how acquisition or like maybe not buying, but how like acquiring property is going to happen in this like crazy expensive market.
To build on it, I think we're often not the decision maker, to be honest. We don't have quarterly shareholder meetings. We don't have revenues driving our decision making. We are typically funded by government agencies, and election cycles are quick. Mm-hmm. Let's be real. Let's keep it real.
Some quicker than others.
Some quicker. We're operating in a region right now that's going through dissolution, where the former mayor of one of the municipalities that we work in is looking at a different job. And all of these things impact the way we do our work. We are actively supporting international students, and we have a federal government that's either taking or not taking a stand on what that means in our communities. We can't make these decisions often on our own, And it's the ghettoization of social services. We've been told, take this little bit, don't save any of it or you're doing a bad job. Spend all of it. Don't think about the future. And then they're like, well, why didn't you think about that? Didn't you think your roof would crash at some point? Mm-hmm. You knew the HVAC was gonna go, but you told me to spend all of it, and you get mad at me when I don't. Mm-hmm. So you brought up the point earlier too, just about decolonizing the way philanthropy is working. if we keep going with the same structure, we're getting nowhere. We have to honestly take a look at the system, who's benefiting and who's not, and make some critical decisions about who we want to be as Canadians. We have to decide that for ourselves. And Liza, you made a great point about building it into your work plans, and it's part of our, like, look, we're being super transparent about what percentage it is and what percentage it's not. And this is our threshold that we have comfort, and we as partners in the community respect that and want to work with that. You're not the big bad wolf, because I can't afford to buy, so I need to lease from you anyway. But I just think, I think we got to really figure out as Canadians who we want to be. And you asked a great question to a great partner who doesn't turn them away. But again, like, a lot of people do not want people who are at risk of or suffering from homelessness walking into their communities. I went to Toronto Metropolitan, and I always remember freshmen would be like, yeah, I just moved here from insert small town, and I live on Ontario Street. It's close to, I think, this place called Moss Park. And I'm like, how do you feel about that? How's that for you? Like, I grew up in the hood, so for me it's very normal, but you fell into this dream of moving to Toronto, and you saw this amazing picture of your apartment, and then you walk outside and like, look at the ghetto. And it's hard for people to understand what that means, but we have to move to mixed income communities, and that doesn't just mean on the livable side, but on the commercial side. If we don't care for each other, I don't know who will. So it's a tough answer.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's hard to follow, and certainly I can't advise whether to buy or not buy, but what I would say is really the why is that it's better city building, and we need these spaces, and so we need to be thinking in the short term and in the long term. They're here to stay. We need better city building. We need these spaces, and there's value to the big bad developers and the nice developers you want to talk to as well. So there's huge value to including it.
Can I throw in another idea on the table? It's only because I was recently on a study tour in the Netherlands, and what was fascinating to me in Amsterdam in particular, the municipality is the largest landowner to a number, and it offers, so there's a lot less, I mean, there's privately owned land, but in the city, the municipality actively acquires land, and then they offer land lease, like long-term land lease, and then they have a different category for different types of services within. So then you're not having to think through market rate for the not-for-profit, or if it's a public service, so that they have a whole different way of dealing with it. And we're so far from that. And I'm not saying it's the right way or the wrong way, but in my mind, there's a bit of an imbalance in terms of, and apologies to the private sector landowners in the room, that the capital market is not designed to address many of the issues that we're facing right now. And in the absence of what the capital market is not able to do, that's what the role of government and the public sector is. But the public sector, here we are, a city with a $1.6 billion deficit, has not equipped itself for its own role. And so I think that's what part of the symptoms we're experiencing is because of that. And so to the point of decolonization and to the point of thinking about new ways that we should attack this, does have to do with who owns the land and what is it being used for, and how do we deal with common land, open space, public amenities, services, because we can't expect it to be carried only on the back of the private sector. It can't. And so I think that's as much as we can. Every organization can have their ESG program and all their other stuff. It's still not, on the same purpose, not designed for that. And so we've got this mismatch happening right now.
Yeah, I agree. I'm reminded of a project we entitled in Etobicoke, and we had a visionary city folks working on the project, and through Section 37, we were able to secure low rent in a space for 40 years, and that was for a commercial space. But that was the city and the kind of municipality recognizing that their services aren't community centers and libraries. that there needs to be space for other wraparound community services. So it can happen here, and it doesn't have to be like a massive policy thing. It just requires there are tools. I mean, Section 37 not anymore, but it just requires sort of retooling, and we can do it. It's possible.
Yeah, if I could just continue. I think part of it is how much value we place on the public realm and the importance of community space. I sit on the board of Waterfront Toronto, and it's been around for a long time, but the principle going into that was that the public sector would invest, 3 levels of government, in the public realm. The public spaces, the parks, the provision for housing affordability. Before everybody was all in a flap about housing affordability, they should have been in a flap sooner. And and schools, healthcare, like so that's something planners are supposed to do, right? So it is possible, but it means that we put a value on this that is equally on everybody's balance sheet, and we all agree this is important. And when that social contract erodes, it's hard to come. That's sort of what we have to catch up on.
Yeah.
All right, so before we wrap up here, and so many things, so many awesome things that were shared. I know that the wheels in the audience, I certainly hope so, are turning. And I'm sure, many of you are nodding, so thank you. Have questions for our panel. So with that said, we do have our two team members here, Dana and Jamie, with their mics. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand now, and they will come to you with a microphone. I saw one hand over here, and then we'll come to yourself next. Yes.
Given my voice, I may not need the microphone.
If you can say your name and maybe perhaps the organization you're coming from, that'd be great too.
My name is Jeff Good. I'm part of a commercial real estate firm called Cressa. That's not why I'm here.
Okay, good.
I love the panel's conversation and want to acknowledge and thank. I could listen to this all night. This is great. But I had a couple of quick comments, and then I wanted to offer a small resource building tool, if I might. Leslie, your comment about different needs in terms of considering purchase versus lease. The one variable that does tend to pop up a lot in these conversations when I have them is what we've heard a lot about in terms of use. For organizations that are struggling with landlords in a leasing scenario accepting their use, purchase tends to bubble up a lot more. Alex, your comment about having United Way have a capital resource tool, I think is genius. I offer this thought. One of the places that might be well applied is where hubs and shared services already exist, and then we have a government change that pulls the funding out, and they end up ruining that resource. And we saw that at Concord Gate a while back, 6-8 years ago now. In any case, those sorts of resources could have saved a really valuable tool for many community groups. The shared resource, in brief, is this. If you haven't heard of something called the Nonprofit Centers Network, you may want to look at it. It has lots of free resources. It's inexpensive to join. It's about hubs and sharing resources between collaborative spaces. They're big on social purpose real estate. I'm an ex-board member in the spirit of transparency, but I wanted to make sure that people knew about it because I think it's a really great tool.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
And
We are a member as well of NCN, so that's great.
Good evening, Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Anna Perez, and I work for the Royal Bank of Canada, primarily commercial banking, the non-for-profit and public sector team. And I am hearing a lot of incredible opportunities for collaboration, and I have a question and a comment. And my question is, what are the resources available for the existing boards? Because as someone that works directly with nonprofits, all the people that are actively managing the organizations are in the trenches in the same way that I am in the trenches with them. And I hear about the struggles on a daily basis. But sometimes there's a little bit of a blockade when they have these amazing ideas and willingness to collaborate, and then it comes to the board. and then the board has a very, very different mindset, and then all this collaboration sort of fades like the confetti you were talking about. So I guess my question is, what kind of support exists for when those situations arise? And my comment is, we're talking about colonial institutions, and I know when we think of banks come at the top of mind. But slowly but surely, there are little cracks where light comes in. And believe it or not, what I have to say for nonprofits that are in the audience is leverage your bank. We are like octopuses with tentacles everywhere that go beyond your bank accounts, beyond the lending. We are connected, and we have access to a lot of resources that might not be part of your day-to-day banking. Just ask. We are limited by privacy rules. I've had a couple of clients that have come to me and say, I am open, you can disclose that we work together, I don't have an issue in that, and good things have happened, so leverage your bank.
So I could try and, I could try and take the first one. So Leslie mentioned it. We do a program with the School of Cities Infrastructure Institute at U of T. It's called Groundwork. And it's it's a capacity building ladder, we call it in our nonprofit speak. And so all the way to the refining your pitch piece, and that's for organizations that have a site or have a particular project well thought out, but there's early parts to that ladder too. So one of there's parts of the ladder that are about how you work with your board to start to get them thinking about this work. And then what we are also looking at doing and testing out is the mentoring, the networking that can happen as well. So for organizations that have done that big slog to get their board on side, to get their board thinking and understanding their role as it relates to risk with a capital project, like what can EDs or the folks driving those projects learn from those who have been through the process. So, happy to talk to people who want to know a little bit more about the program and some of the United Way's work in that space. And then the second part,
No, I was going to, that same question, maybe I'll stick with that one and then you can go back to that. We have so this is, you can change your board, right?
Yes, that too.
So I say this somewhat facetiously only because we have a program right now called Board Shift, which is focused on Indigenous, Black, and racialized rising leaders and training them and matching them with not-for-profit and public sector boards. We're focused in that space, not in the private sector right now, but because it's a new lens, new view, different understanding what is the expertise the board really needs, and ensuring and supporting them in having a robust pipeline of diverse candidates to be considered. Because those of you who are on boards know the data, board members open up their Rolodex, they identify people that they know, and then it's just like mirror images of themselves sitting around the table all the time and not necessarily reflective of the society or the people they serve. So, the boards themselves, if they don't have a succession plan, it's all about good governance. It's good governance training. And even if you don't get new members, doing the kind of getting the aptitude around the dimensions of governance, which are more than just operating an organization, and getting a board to think of their strategic role as well as their operational role, makes it easier to be open to those issues. I sit on several boards, and most of them have been governing boards as opposed to, but right now I sit on the Hong Center for Geriatric Care, and it tends to be more operational, right? Which was a shock for me, because I was like, what do you mean I gotta read this entire spreadsheet and comment on it? So, but that's where, having someone you say, okay, we don't have to do all of this, and the kind of getting different types of expertise onto the board is one part of the solution. I don't think it's the only solution, because that takes really long, right? Yeah. So next, I don't have another question.
Oh, now
you had another
Now
point.
I forget the other point.
Just a comment about just when it comes to
using your bank, reaching out
right,
to the bank.
yes,
Yes. Thank you to RBC, they're one of our supporters.
Yes, and shout out to RBC. I think I actually know your teammate, and teammate sent you here. Yeah, okay, I do. He sent you here today. Yeah, so RBC is actually one of the only major banks that actually has a dedicated nonprofit financing division. So all they do is financing for nonprofits, and they're the only ones that have it. So shout out to them. Yes. And I think because we are running low on time, I wanted to give the floor for one, maybe two more questions. If anybody has any questions. Don't all jump at once. Okay, no more questions? All right. Well then.
We got one in the back?
We have one more in the back? Okay, we have one more in the back. Sorry, missed that.
I love it. She keeps receiving checks.
I just have a quick, I love this working.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this talk. It was very informative and insightful to hear your very different perspectives on the current situation in terms of nonprofits. I was wondering, because we're currently, seems to be an economic recession, post-COVID, there seems to be a lot of precarity in the nonprofit sector. I mean, crazy prices in terms of real estate in Toronto. How do you feel in terms of optimism moving forward with all of these progressive ideas that we're talking about in terms of systemic change, in terms of progressive zoning, or different types of initiatives between different types of public, private, and nonprofit sector? So where is your optimism lying right now?
Ooh. Who wants to go?
I can.
Yeah, you want to go first?
Hey, listen. We put people on the moon. We rallied in a pandemic to invent a vaccine in a milliseconds in the universe. We are probably, despite everything that we're going through, which are multiple crises, generally speaking, the population is better off than it was 40 years ago. And so I remain inordinately optimistic that as a society, we can take the right fork in the road. It is precarious, you're right, that's the word you use. But there's enough goodwill, and I spend all my time with folks in their 20s and 30s, and enough drive to not want to settle for the status quo to be optimistic. It's going to be super hard. That shouldn't dull our optimism, because we will get there, but it'll be hard. Like, it's going to be hard. It's going to be ugly, hard, like it's all the things, you have family, you know what it's like.
But we have some really smart people in the room. That's going to help us.
You know what, I'd love to layer on that, because I'm always optimistic, like maybe a little bit too much, which is maybe gross, but really, like the urgency I feel in my lifetime in terms of what I can do, right? Projects are long. Projects take a long time. What we're talking about is enormously complicated, but if you can do a little bit, right, and a little bit more and a little bit more, we're going to be better off for it, right? And I get up every day, I have 3 kids, and like ultimately that urgency to do and to do it, we have to, right? We have to do a little bit every day and just keep building, because that'll make it better. Sorry to soapbox.
I should have probably went first, because
You're not optimistic?
I am not as optimistic as my colleagues.
You totally should have gone first.
I am a pessimist by nature. I'll say I'm optimistic for my kids, because I agree with those comments that this next generation, like, they're not taking no shit, and they're ready to change everything. But I gotta be real. Like, we've seen this story before. I am a black person. I stand on that, and we've been promised things many times. So until I see something, I'm not cashing any checks. I do feel optimism about the next generation, because there's been enough in this modern social justice movement for people to not accept where we are now. And I do think that the greatest tool we have, the thing that's making me most optimistic for my kids, is the growing empathy, because, the separation of classes is disappearing. We're all kind of falling into some similar social classes now, and I think that that's going to be the big shift that's going to happen in this next gen to make things better. So I am optimistic, just not as optimistic as the two of you.
Justin, are you saying that we're all beginning to suffer equally?
Okay, so maybe not equally, but a little more equitably.
Justin, if I can just add, And I know we're talking about optimism, but just the four of you and the work that you're doing, you're saving lives, you're changing lives for the better. And just, I'm just so inspired by all four of you sitting up here today and your leadership. And I just want to say a heartfelt thank you. And it's just so great to hear your passion, your commitment, and so that's my optimism for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and on that positive note, we have one last question from Pam in the red blazer. Yes.
Hi, so we are primarily people of privilege, and so optimism depends on us.
Yes, that's a good
Nice.
point.
Well
Very
said.
nice.
Optimism depends on us.
Well said.
Well said.
Be optimistic.
Well said. No, well said.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that and that positive note and the optimism in this group. There's a reason why we strategically selected the panelists that we did for today, because I think this group, really touches upon the micro, meso, and macro levels of the system, and being able to bring together all of your perspectives and experiences and contributions, not only in your day jobs, but in your own life and outside of your gigs, to contribute to building, inclusive, healthy, thriving communities. And it gives me a lot of hope and optimism knowing that, we have people like you that are in leadership positions and making change in this world. And so thank you so much for that and for this thought-provoking discussion. I will now turn it over to Joanne for closing remarks.
Thank you. My name is Joanne Badley, and I'm the Vice Chair of the IDEA Committee. And I just have a few closing remarks before we get you back to networking with each other. I want to say thank you to Arlene for your fun and graceful introduction, and all of your ongoing support to the IDEA Committee. Thank you as well to all of the IDEA Committee members that helped put this together, that were here to help set up, and that came to support this panel discussion. Thank you, of course, to Anna and Jesse for your moderation of this panel and the discussion that's informative and very timely. Thank you, of course, to our wonderful speakers for their candid and insightful commentary. Justin, CEO of Indus Community Services, Alex Dow, Director of Community Initiatives and Partnerships at United Way, Lisa Stipp, VP of Innovation and Design at Task Impact, and Leslie Wu, of course, CEO at Civic Action. Also, a big thank you to all of you for coming tonight, for being here with us for this discussion. We really appreciate it. We truly feel that this topic is very important, especially in light of the rising inflation and the need for more social services, as Anna mentioned at the beginning of our discussion. So thank you very much. And with that, I would like to open up the networking portion of our night. Please enjoy the food and drink and work on our connections as well.
Yeah.